Welcome to the Sunday morning drive. It is so great to have all of you here. I am Chris, and I am going to be taking you on the drive this morning. Everyone who is in the chat, everyone who is in the comments, it's great to have you here on this Sunday morning here on Sports Empire Network. So thank you for joining us. Make sure that you are doing all the things that you need to do in order to make sure that the Empire is a tremendous part of your day. Make sure that you are smashing the like button. Make sure that you are subscribing to all of our social media accounts. Make sure that you are doing your part to make sure that you are receiving all of the content that the Empire has to offer to you 7 days a week. It's not just here on Sunday mornings. I'm glad you're here, let me tell you. But we got things happening every day of the week. If you weren't around yesterday and you missed the Big Dogs, the debut of the Big Dogs here for this season, what a great college program that was. If college football is your jam, make sure that you are here every Saturday morning on the Sports Empire Network, checking out the Big Dogs. And then, of course, we have so much content during the week. You know, I don't have time to run through all of it right now, but it is some really, really great stuff. So I am Chris, and I'm going to lead you this morning on our Sunday morning drive as we prepare for the start of the 2023 NFL season. Now, we might have some guests that pop in and out of the show today, but we will get to that when that comes up. But for right now, I want you to buckle up because for the next hour or so, we are going to break down everything that is the 2023 NFL season as we get ready for some football this upcoming week. So let's go through it. Let's go through divisions. Let's go through who's making the playoffs. Let's go through who's making the conference championship games. Let's go through who we think is going to be the Super Bowl matchup this season. I need to hear you. I need to see you in the chat this morning. As I'm going through my stuff, I want to hear what you think. If you agree, if you disagree, if you got a different take, if you got a better take, let me know. Talk to me in the chat, all right? Let me talk to you, all right? And I'm not even an LA Knight guy, all right? And don't get me going on the disrespect that took place with The Miz last night, but that's neither here nor there because we are focused on the NFL season, ladies and gentlemen. So let's just jump right into it. Before we get there, let's take a look at what's happening in the chat this morning. We got Kyle up in the chat last Sunday before football. Let's go. I feel you, Kyle. I've missed it. I've missed it so much. I am so excited for football to finally regular season football. I know we've had the preseason and it's been nice. It's been a nice little appetizer to kind of get you going. But ladies and gentlemen, we are on the precipice of it. It is going to be go time. And I cannot wait. I cannot wait. Freddie's in the chat this morning, dropping the fire emojis. Thank you, Freddie. Appreciate you. Appreciate the love. But ladies and gentlemen, let's jump right into it. Let's start with the AFC East. As you know, that is where my team resides. So let's just go through it. So if we're looking at the AFC East, obviously we know the contenders. We know who's there. We got the Bills, we got the Dolphins, we got the Patriots, and we got the Jets. So looking back at the 2022 season, the Bills finished 13-3, the Dolphins finished 9-8, the Patriots went 8-9, and the Jets went 7-10. As you know, Bills and Dolphins go into the playoffs. Bills have their playoffs end to the Bengals, and the Dolphins end up losing to the Bills with their third string quarterback in a game that they were leading late in the game. But I digress. We're not talking about 2022. We are shifting our focus to 2023. So as we go through each division today, we're going to go based on finishing order, bottom to the top. So we'll start with the New York Jets this year, who I do not think are going to finish at the bottom of the division. Obviously, the Jets have so much expectation coming into this season with the addition of Aaron Rodgers, with some of the offensive pieces that they have added around Aaron Rodgers, with the fact that they already have a top 5 defense that should just continue to grow and should just continue to get better. The sky really is the limit if you think about it, if you are a New York Jets fan. And I'll be honest, I don't like the Jets. I don't. If as a Dolphin fan, you deal with a lot of nonsense, right? And Buffalo fan, take out the last 4 or 5 years, you were in the same boat. Jet fan, you were also in the same boat. For many, many years in the AFC East, it was Tom Brady's world, and we were all just living in it. But as a Dolphin fan, we kind of learned to respect Tom Brady. We didn't like the Patriots, but you respect greatness, right? So, and I get it. The Dolphins were never going to be on the level of Tom Brady, so we didn't take our anger out there. Then we look at Buffalo and we're like, Buffalo's in the same boat that we're in. None of us can find a quarterback. It is what it is. So that the hate just went to the New York Jets. And not to mention, I'm sorry, Jet fan. Most of you, I don't find likable. I have a hard time with Jet fans, just like I have a hard time with Mets fans. And interestingly enough, a lot of times y'all are the same. Jet fans and Mets fans, maybe because it rhymes. I don't know, but I digress. So if I look at it realistically, though, I like to do that here. I like to have a voice of realism. And when it comes to the New York Jets, I can do that. I can look at it realistically, and I can say the Jets should be a playoff team. Now, in my opinion, they're going to be competing for a playoff team. I think their ceiling is a division. I think their floor is the entire thing implodes. So honestly, with the New York Jets, I'm all over the map because there's so many things that can kind of contribute to what this season looks like. I know a lot of people are drinking the New York Jet Kool-Aid. A lot of people here at Sports Empire Network are drinking the New York Jet Kool-Aid. And I understand why. Because Aaron Rodgers is that guy. He is going to have a good season. I don't think he's washed. I don't think he's done. I do think he has lost a step, and I literally mean a step, because he is no longer the mobile version of Aaron Rodgers that we were talking about 5 or 6 years ago. And what I mean by the mobile version of Aaron Rodgers is just a guy that has the ability to move the pocket and kind of slip around. And I remember the Dolphins played him, I think it was about 5 years ago. And there were so many plays where they were literally a half a second away from a sack. And, he would just scoop 6 steps to his left, 4 steps to his right, 3 steps forward. He was just mobile enough to where you just couldn't get him. He was like a slippery little fish. He just slid right out of there. He doesn't really have that anymore. Yes, he's not Tom Brady. He's not a statue back there, but he just doesn't have the legs that he had 5 or 6 years ago, which it's okay. That's what happens when you're approaching 40 years old. So I get it. So when it comes to the New York Jets, and I know that this is the tired script, the tired narrative, but it really does come down to that offensive line. Because if the offensive line starts to have issues, you're then going to see issues across the board. And what I mean is, if Aaron's getting hit, if Aaron's timing is thrown off, if Aaron's not comfortable in the pocket, if Aaron has to speed things up a little bit, it's a chain reaction. It impacts everything else on the field. So now he's going through his progressions a little quicker. Now he's trying to get the ball out of his hands a little quicker. Now he is seeing that things are not there, and he's throwing the ball away sooner than he would have if he just had an extra second or two in the pocket. So that's what I mean by this all really does predicate off the offensive line. I don't think the O-line is going to get him killed back there, but you can't sit here and say it's Aaron Rodgers, he'll make it work, they're fine. This is literally a quarterback who never had a bad offensive line in Green Bay. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the last time I looked at them, I'm pretty sure that Aaron Rodgers' worst offensive line in the history of his Green Bay Packer career was high 20s. The rest of them were top half of the league. So when you're consistently given an average to an above average offensive line, and most of those years in Green Bay, it was above average to great. Let's be honest. Green Bay was always good when it came to offensive lines. So when that's been what you're used to your entire career, and now you come to the Jets and you're hoping it's average, it could, I think the ceiling for the Jets O line is average, but you also have Mekhi Becton, who we don't know what we're going to get from him. We don't know if he's going to take himself out of games. We don't know what his conditioning is going to look like. Your left tackle is 37, 38 years old. And can he play the entire season? If he does, great. You're going to be solid on the left side. But if, like many older tackles, he misses 4 or 5 games, you just start to ask yourself those questions. So do I think the Jets are a playoff team? Absolutely. And when we get to the end of this, I'll tell you where I see it shaking out. But that's my concern when it comes to Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets. Now let's look at the New England Patriots. They finished 3rd in the division last year. At least they have an offensive coordinator this year, right? I mean, they're kind of trending in the right direction as far as getting their act together. They've signed Gesicki in the offseason. They signed Juju Smith-Schuster in the offseason. They just signed Jalen Reagor. Their defense is going to be where it needs to be because it's a Bill Belichick team. So we're not really concerned about that. But what we are concerned about is the quarterback situation. And this is a quarterback-driven league. And when you don't have the best quarterback in your division, you have to then ask yourself, are we really competing for a division, or are we just competing for a wild card spot? And if you don't have the second best quarterback in your division, well, now you have to ask yourself, are we even competing for a playoff spot? And that's what it's going to come down to for the New England Patriots. Because if you look at it, they have the 4th best quarterback in their division. And there is no question about that. I don't want you to sit here and say, because again, we take all things equal. We're going to assume that the offensive line is going to hold up for Aaron Rodgers. We're going to assume that Tua stays healthy for the entire season. We're going to assume that the roller coaster ride with Josh Allen has more ups than it has downs. All right. So when we take all of those things and we assume glass half full for every quarterback situation in the division, Mac Jones is the 4th best quarterback in that division. Do you get into the playoffs with the 4th best quarterback in your division? I'm just saying. Just ask yourself that. Look at all the other divisions in the NFL. Think about the quarterbacks in those divisions. Rank them 1 to 4. And how many of those 3rd and 4th place quarterbacks do you see getting into the playoffs? That's what the Patriots are looking to overcome this season. Miami finished 2nd in this division last season. They add Jalen Ramsey to the defensive side. Obviously, he is injured and going to miss about half the season. That is a significant blow. Don't let Dolphin fans tell you it's not. It is a big deal. One of Miami's biggest issues last season was the secondary. They couldn't stay healthy. Miami literally was at one point picking people up off the street to play cornerback and safety because they had so many injuries across the board in their secondary. So having Ramsey injured to start the season and missing half or maybe more than half the season is not ideal. But on the offensive side of the ball, the Dolphins do bring in Vic Fangio, which if you're sitting here saying Fangio's nothing, it's not that big of a deal, it doesn't really move the needle, you need to stop. You need to stop because like half the league, 3/4 of the league runs some sort of principle from the Kyle Shanahan offense. The same thing is happening on the other side of the ball with the Vic Fangio defense. It just is. So what Fangio does on the defensive side of the ball, it's elite. It's genius. It's going to tremendously help the Dolphins defense. I'm not saying the Dolphins are going to have a better defense than the New York Jets. All right. I'm not saying the Dolphins are going to have a top 3 defense in the league. What I'm telling you is the Dolphins are going to go from somewhere in the middle 20s, which is where their defense was last season, to they're going to go somewhere probably in the top 15. And that right there is a significant jump when you're looking at the offensive side of the ball, where their quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa led the NFL in nearly every statistical category before he missed the end of the season due to his concussions. So again, you look at everything half full. You look at everything assuming that people aren't going to get hurt and things aren't going to implode and fall apart. And you look at what happened last season and what happens if the same transpires into this season. So if Tua stays on the field and he puts up the same numbers that he did last season, which means the Dolphins are going to be a top 3 offense if he does that. They showed it could happen last season, so there's no reason to think it can't happen this season. And then if Vic Fangio improves the defense like he's done every other team he's ever been a defensive coordinator for, the Dolphins are going to make strides this season. Does it mean they're going to make strides and win the division? That remains to be seen. But you're looking at a playoff team last year with an elite offense that proved to be an elite offense last year. That's going to have a significantly improved defense this year. So everything seems to be trending in the right direction in Miami. And then, of course, you have Buffalo. The king of the mountain, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Super Bowl aspirations. Where does Josh Allen rank amongst quarterbacks in the NFL? Some have him 2 behind Mahomes. Some have him 3 behind Mahomes and Burrow. I've even seen him drop as far as 4 or 5. But generally speaking, Josh Allen is viewed by almost everyone as a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. Even by me as a Dolphin fan, as someone who doesn't particularly care for the Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. That being said, there's a lot going on in Buffalo. There's a lot going on, and just as easily as I can see Josh Allen and the Bills putting this behind them and powering forward and going 13-4 or 14-3 or whatever the case might be, and just running away to this division and leaving the Dolphins and the Jets behind them, with 9 or 10 wins apiece, fighting for a wild card. Just as easily as I can see that, I can also see Buffalo finishing 3rd in this division because the Bills have issues right now. The Bills have issues with Stephon Diggs. The Bills have issues with consistency from Josh Allen. The Bills have issues with play calling. The Bills have issues with their running game. There's a lot of potential issues that Buffalo has. That being said, it's hard for me to knock a team that because they had those issues last year too. Let's not pretend these are all new issues. Diggs was a diva last season. It got worse, but he was a diva last season. They didn't have a running game last season. Josh Allen was up and down last season. So these are all things we've seen before with Buffalo. These are not new issues per se, but they are also things that we need to look at and ask ourselves, is there a point where it becomes too much with Buffalo? Is there a point where you look at it and you're like, it's a lot to overcome? And those are the questions that I have for the Bills going into this season. Now, leading up to this, I've said on a few different shows that I think the Dolphins are going to be the team to win the division. And I made a lot of those comments prior to Jalen Ramsey going out. I have to look at this realistically, and I have to look at it and say not having Ramsey for the entire season is going to impact the defense. With Ramsey, I honestly believe the Dolphins could have had a top 10 defense. Without Ramsey, I think we're looking at top 15, top 16. And because of that, I don't think Miami wins the division. I think that Miami wins a wild card. I think they're in that conversation. I think they're solidly in that conversation. But I don't think it's going to be a division just because I think they're going to be a tick behind on the defensive side to where they need to be to take that division this season. That being said, I don't knock people until they show me they deserve to be knocked. And Buffalo has gone through all this nonsense before, and they've always come out the other side. So here we are, the precipice of the regular season, and it hurts to do this, but I'm going to put Buffalo on top of the AFC East. And it's not going to be by a lot. I'm going to have Buffalo as a 12-win team. I think Miami is going to be an 11-win team. And I think the Jets are going to be a 10-win team. And that's how I think it's going to shake out. I think it's going to be that close. And obviously, when it's that close and it's razor thin, one or two things could completely shake it up, and you could have Buffalo third, and you could have the Jets, winning the division, or you could have Miami third, and the Jets win. It's all relevant, right? But the way I see it, the Bills have overcome the nonsense before. I don't think Buffalo is going to have a deep playoff run. I think Miami is going to have a deeper playoff run than Buffalo is going to have. But I think there's just so much talent on that Bills team that they can overcome the nonsense in the regular season. And then I think, just like we saw last year in the postseason, it's going to rear its ugly head again, and it's going to be deja vu for Buffalo. And I think that's where things kind of finally implode. As far as the Jets go, I think the Jets are going to be competing for a wild card spot all season. I think it's going to come down to the last game or two, but I do see them finishing third. And then as far as the Patriots go, I'm sorry. You got the worst quarterback in the division. You have the worst roster in the division. I understand on the defensive side, you're still going to be good, but it just simply isn't enough. And as a result, the New England Patriots are going to finish fourth in the AFC East. Let's take a look at the AFC West next. Broncos finished last there last season. The Raiders were third. The Chargers were second. And the Chiefs were first. There isn't much to talk about here in the AFC West. The Broncos are not going to finish last this year. That's going to be the Raiders. The Raiders are going to be, hands down, one of the worst teams in the NFL. I understand that they got Jacobs back. I understand that Garoppolo looks pretty healthy. That's great. I understand they have Devontae Adams. Those are all nice things to have. But that's really all they have. They don't have much to talk about on the defensive side. They don't have much else to talk about on the offensive side of the ball. I get it. We're not going to talk about injury history, and I'm a Jimmy G guy, so I'm not going to sit here and hold that against him, just like I'm not going to hold injury history against Tua, just like I'm not going to say that Aaron Rodgers is going to be a 40-year-old quarterback with a subpar O-line and have an injury conversation there. I'm not going to hold injuries against Jimmy G. All I'm going to say is this. Jimmy Garoppolo is a good to great quarterback when he has all the pieces he needs around him, when he has a great offensive line, when he has multiple weapons on the offensive side of the ball, when he has an above average to good to great run game, when he has an elite defense helping him in all the ways an elite defense helps an offense. When all of those things are in place, like they were in San Francisco, you have a quarterback that can lead a team to the playoffs, to a division, to a conference championship. All those things make sense. He doesn't have any of those in Las Vegas. He has bits and pieces of those, but he doesn't have them collectively. And for those reasons, that is why it is not going to go well for the Raiders this season. They are not going to be a good team. Now, I don't think they're going to be as bad as the Arizona Cardinals, who may not win a game this season, who are not favored to win a game this season, who are actively, it looks like, trying to win Caleb Williams. But I do not think it's going to be any more than 4 wins for the Raiders this season. They are going to finish dead last in the AFC West. And you can come to the chat and talk to me about it. Prove me wrong. It's not going to happen. They are far and away the worst team in that division. Right above them is going to be the Denver Broncos. I like Russell Wilson. I am a Russell Wilson guy. I am a Sean Payton guy, but I am also a realistic guy. If that entire team was healthy, I would still say the Broncos finished third, but I would say they're competing for a wild card, that there is an outside chance they get a wild card and they sneak into the playoffs. That offense, the season hasn't begun yet. That offense is so banged up. Who is Russell Wilson throwing the damn ball to, guys? Who? Excuse me. I'm getting all pepped up about Russell Wilson over here. Let me pause for a minute. Take a quick sip of my Mountain Dew Baja Blast. Who is Russell Wilson throwing the football to? Because Judy's got the hamstring. That's going to hurt him for a while. He might be back week 2 or 3. He could miss a decent amount of time. He could have a nagging hamstring all season long. We know how these things play out. He's already lost 2 other receivers, and we haven't even started the season yet. So he's going into the season down targets. What if we have another injury at wide receiver? What if one of his tight ends gets banged up? That's all I'm saying. And Mo, I see you. Mo, what's up, Mo? Mo's my guy. Let Russ cook. I agree. Let Russ cook. But Mo, when your ingredients are Cheetos, a bell pepper, and salt, what are you making with that? You're not making a gourmet meal, right? So I agree. Let Russ cook, but Russ needs the ingredients to cook. And right now, he doesn't have everything in the kitchen that he needs for it to be pretty. He has enough in the kitchen to win games. He has enough in the kitchen for the team to be competitive, especially if the defense is as good as it was last season. But a lot needs to go right in Denver right now with how the roster is currently constructed, with who is currently healthy, if Russ is going to cook and it's going to equal not only wins, but multiple wins, consistent wins, to put them into that playoff conversation. And Mo, I love what you're saying here. 2 words, Mike Evans. Let me holler at you, Mike Evans. That is what the Denver Broncos need. The Denver Broncos need a talent like Mike Evans. And I don't know why, and maybe he has been, but once Mike Evans comes out and says, we're not getting the deal done, they have until week 1. If I'm Sean Payton, I'm picking up the phone. What do you need? What do I need to give you to get Mike Evans? What is it? Set the price and we'll figure it out from there, because that would be a game changer in Denver. The Chargers finished second in their division last season, and sorry, Charger fan, you're going to finish second in your division again this season. No one's taking down the Chiefs. The Chiefs are going to be the best team in the AFC West. The Chiefs are probably going to be the best team in the AFC, although I do think there is one team out there potentially that could have a better record than them, and we'll get to that in a second. But when it comes to the AFC West, the Chiefs are everything that the division needs. They are the top of the mountain, and the Chargers simply are not going to get there this season, but that's okay, Charger fan, because you should be in the playoffs. You have an actual offensive coordinator now. You have an actual NFL offensive mind running your offense. And I think that Justin Herbert is going to pop off this season. And which is silly to say, right? Because his first 3 seasons in the league, he's blown away every record you can think of from a quarterback stance, but he's going to be even better this season because of what they have in the offensive coordinator room. And hopefully, if his receivers stay healthy, because again, we are glass half full over here on the morning show, and we're going to assume that his receivers are going to stay healthy. That's what we're going to assume. So if his weapons are healthy, Herbert is going to crush this season. He just isn't going to crush enough to take down the Kansas City Chiefs. So the Chiefs are going to finish first. The Chargers are second. The Broncos are third. And the Raiders are fourth. I would like to think the Broncos are in the conversation for the playoffs. But again, what does that wide receiver room look like? How healthy can they remain during the season? Does it get worse during the season? That's going to all kind of impact how it shakes out for the Broncos. Chiefs fan, I'm sorry I'm not talking more about you, but what can I say? I can sit here and say that, the defense is a concern, especially with the holdout of Chris Jones. I get that. I can talk about how Kelsey is your obviously number 1 option on offense. Who is number 2? But even if we talk about those things, isn't Patrick Mahomes just going to overcome it all? Isn't Patrick Mahomes just going to do Patrick Mahomes things and be elite and be legendary and get you to where you need to be? Because again, just like with Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, I have the same mindset when it comes to Patrick Mahomes. I'm not going to sit here and knock him until I actually see a reason to do so. And he overcame a bunch of garbage last season to win a championship. So I have zero reason to believe that he cannot continue to overcome stuff to win the division. I'm not saying they're going to repeat as Super Bowl champions. I'm not saying they're going to repeat as AFC champions. But come on now. It is nonsense if you think they are not going to win this division and win it handedly. Moving on from the AFC West, let's talk about the AFC North. Last year, the Cleveland Browns finished 7-10. The Steelers were 9-8. The Ravens were 10-7, and the Bengals were 12-4. Remember, we're going from the bottom to the top based on how they finished the year prior, which means we are starting with the Cleveland Browns, who, I'm sorry, they are going to finish last again. I am not. I repeat it. I am not. I will say it again. I am not a Deshaun Watson guy. I just can't do it. Cannot do it. I think he was a stat guy with Houston. I think he had a couple of decent seasons in Houston. But let's look at the regression of Deshaun Watson. The man missed 2 years of football. He played 6 games last year. He was garbage for the most part in those 6 games. He's had an entire offseason program. He's had an entire preseason, right? And what are we seeing? We're still seeing Deshaun Watson complete between 50 and 60% of his passes, which is not good enough. He needs to be somewhere around that 65 to 67 range. We're still seeing Deshaun Watson look confused at times in this Cleveland offense. And we're still seeing Deshaun Watson look a step or two behind where he was at his ceiling in Houston. So when does it magically get better? When do we magically see a different Deshaun Watson? Because it was supposed to happen right now. It was supposed to happen in the preseason. We were supposed to see Deshaun look comfortable in the offense this preseason. We were supposed to see glimpses of what the Deshaun of old was this preseason because he's had the entire offseason to work with this team. He's had the entire offseason to be comfortable with his playbook. But what we're continuing to see is a Deshaun Watson that doesn't look comfortable, a Deshaun Watson that does look like he's lost a step. I'm not saying Deshaun Watson is washed. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying, though, is I have not seen so far anything to lead me to believe Deshaun is not at least the third best quarterback in that division, which leads me to the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers are going to finish third in this division, and Kenny Pickett may not be today a better quarterback than Deshaun Watson, but Kenny Pickett has a better team than Deshaun Watson. And I think that Kenny Pickett is trending in the better direction than Deshaun Watson. And for those reasons, the Steelers are going to finish higher than the Cleveland Browns in that division. Will they make the wild card? I think a lot of things need to go their way. I think they're probably still a year away. I think they're a 9-win team just because, Tomlin doesn't have losing seasons. So I can see them winning 9 games and missing the playoffs. I suppose they could win 9 or 10 and surprise you and sneak in there, but third place is where they're going to be in this division. That leaves you with the Baltimore Ravens, who I think are going to finish second, and the Cincinnati Bengals, who are going to take this thing yet again. I like Lamar Jackson. I do. I'm not going to talk about his injuries because I said I wasn't going to do that with other quarterbacks, so I'm not going to do that with Lamar either. I like the weapons, some of the weapons that the Ravens have. I don't like their defense. Lamar is going to electrify 100%. Lamar is going to do Lamar things this season 100%. What is that defense going to do? Because as great as Lamar is going to be, I think Joe Burrow is going to be just as great. Now, he's not going to electrify you with his legs the way Lamar is going to, but Joe Burrow is going to electrify you in other ways. So my question is, what does the Ravens defense do? I don't like the Ravens secondary. I don't like the Ravens front seven. They don't have a pass rush, and they don't really have anyone in the secondary that I consider to be locked down. Humphreys is coming back from his foot issue. Outside of him, what do you really have? So when you look at the defensive side of the ball, when I have questions about your secondary and I have questions about your pass rush, well, now I'm concerned about your entire defense because usually those two things play off each other. If your secondary is not great, your pass rush, if you have a good one, will make your secondary better. They'll get to the quarterback quicker. They're going to force off-time throws. They're going to put your secondary in situations to eat. If your pass rush is lacking and your secondary is good, that's okay, because the back end will hold up a little bit longer because of how talented they are. And they're going to put you in situations where even if the quarterback has time to throw, hopefully he's throwing into tighter windows because of what your secondary is doing over there. What happens when your secondary isn't great and your pass rush isn't great? Now those things are not playing off of each other. Now your quarterback that you're going against has time to throw, and he's throwing against a secondary that isn't going to be locked down. I think the Ravens are going to give up a lot of points. I think there's going to be a lot of shootouts. They're going to win some of them, but they're also going to lose some of them, and that's why they're going to finish second in that division to the Cincinnati Bengals. I get it. People are saying, "Well, it's Joe Burrow's got the calf." You know, guys, he's got the calf. I've said it, but he's been back at practice. He's been moving around. He looks all right. So I don't think it's doom and gloom. I think he's going to be just okay. So the Bengals are going to win that division. The Ravens are going to come in second. The Steelers are going to be third. And the Cleveland Browns are going to wrap up the bottom. Last division in the AFC. Let's talk about the AFC South. The Texans were the bottom of that division last season, followed by the Colts, then the Titans, and then the Jaguars. Texans, I don't think you're going to finish last this season. I don't think you're going to be particularly good, but I also don't think you are going to be the basement of the AFC South. I think that belongs to the Indianapolis Colts. Anthony Richardson has talent. He has potential. He has a gift that I think is going to result in a lot of highlights this season, but I don't think it's going to result in good football. He isn't talented enough as a thrower of the football to lead this team to victories. He also doesn't have the talent around him to do that. We don't know how the Jonathan Taylor thing is going to play out. We do know he won't be there the first 4 games. And we also know that they don't have a deep running back room to support JT not being there the first 4 games or being there at all this season or whatever that shakes out to be. Even if Jonathan Taylor played all 17 games for the Indianapolis Colts this season, I would still have them finishing dead last in this division. Right above them is going to be the Houston Texans, and it isn't going to be that far. It might be by a game or 2. Houston is going to look better this season. I think their defense is going to be above average. I think they're going to have glimpses on the offensive side, but they still are not a good team. 6 wins might be their ceiling, maybe 7 if things bounce their way, but that's it. They're not going to be in contention for a wild card. They might upset a team or 2. You know, they might win a game against the Tennessee Titans that we didn't think they were going to win. Maybe they play the Jaguars tough one week. I can see those things happening, but I don't see much more out of the Houston Texans. Tennessee is the intriguing one. I have Tennessee finishing second in this division because I think the Jaguars are really going to take the next step. I'm really on this Jacksonville bandwagon, and we'll get to that in a second. Tennessee has the pieces needed to be a playoff team. They have the pieces, for the most part, that are needed to compete for this division. I just don't particularly like the pieces they have. They're good pieces. They're not great pieces. They're above average pieces in some spots. But there's just, you ever look at something and you're like, man, if this was like 3 years ago, that would be it. And if you look at Tennessee 3, that was it. That's when they were going to an AFC championship. That's when they were, the number 1 seed. That's when we were looking at it like, hey, whoa, Tennessee, hello. We're not there anymore. There's a lot of question marks on this team. I still think they can compete for a wild card. I think they might be in the hunt for the division up until maybe Thanksgiving, Christmas. Thanksgiving. But then I think the Jacksonville Jaguars are just going to run away with it. Jacksonville has a chance to be something special this season. If you look at Jacksonville's schedule, if you look at the progression of Trevor Lawrence, if you take into consideration how surprisingly good this defense was last year and how I think they're going to be even better this season, if you look at what Calvin Ridley, and don't sleep on that man. Please do not sleep on Calvin Ridley. He is a guy, and he is going to be the guy in Jacksonville, and he is going to really, really finish out that wide receiver room and make this team something special on the offensive side. I'm not saying that the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to win a Super Bowl. I'm not saying they're going to go to a Super Bowl. But I think if you look at the schedule and you look at how things play out and you look at the division, which is it's not the weakest, but it's one of the weaker divisions in the NFL. I think the way things shake out, if the Kansas City Chiefs have any struggles this season, meaning that Mahomes has a 3 or 4 game skid where they lose 3 out of 4, and they end up winning their division by winning 11 games or something like that, I can see the Jacksonville Jaguars being the number 1 seed in the AFC. I can see Jacksonville winning 12 or 13 games this season based on their schedule and the talent on that team and the coaching and everything they have trending in the right direction. Now, all bets are off in the playoffs. Just because you are the number 1 seed coming in doesn't always mean you're going to be the most dominant team. I understand it. When the Chiefs do it, it's a different story. But like I said, if the Chiefs have a couple hiccups in the regular season and end up winning their division with 11 wins, I can see the Jaguars winning 12 games. I can see the Jaguars going 12-5, being the number 1 seed in the AFC. Doesn't mean I think they're going to beat the Chiefs in the playoffs. Doesn't mean I think they're going to win the AFC championship. But I'm saying be open to that possibility because it could happen. All right, let's jump over to the NFC side of things. And we're going to start things off with the NFC East. The Commanders were last season, then the Giants, then the Cowboys, then the Eagles. This has been, and I've gone back and forth. This has been hard for me. This division, it's tricky. I think the Eagles are going to win it. Maybe the Cowboys are in contention towards the end of the season, but I really think the Eagles kind of walk away with this division. It's the rest of it that I don't know. I don't know what we're going to see from Dak Prescott. I don't like the fact that we're putting more on Dak's plate. I don't like the fact that he lost his security blanket in his tight end. I don't like the fact that we haven't seen Gallup turn into what everyone thought he was going to turn into as far as being an upper echelon receiver. I don't like the fact that over the last 3 years, Dak Prescott has stopped running the ball and he stopped being mobile, and he is really a pocket passer now. And if you look at his numbers over the last 3 seasons, it hasn't been great because he is more of a pocket passer now. But then you have his coach saying things like, we want him to be a playmaker. We want to put more on his plate. That concerns me. Then you have the Giants. I don't like Danny Dimes, but I do like Saquon Barkley. I do like Brian Dable. I do like their defense, sort of. I like what they did last season. So I have to look at it and say to myself, well, why can't they do the same thing? Yeah, they got some breaks last season. Yeah, some things, kind of fell their way. But I think the Giants are more stable as an organization than the Cowboys are. So while I think the Cowboys have a higher ceiling, I think the Giants have more potential to simply repeat what they did last season. I'm more confident in the Giants winning 9 or 10 games this season than I am in the Cowboys winning 12 or 13. Just them. And then I look at Washington, who is supposed to be the last place team in that division, who everyone is just anointing to finish in the basement. But I look at Washington and I say, man, Howell looked decent in the preseason. He looked competent. They have weapons on the offensive side. They have a top 5 defense. They play in a division where there's some questions with the Giants. There's some questions with Dallas. Why can't they win? A team that won, 8 games last season? Yeah, they went 8-1 last season. Why can't a team that went 8-1 last season, who I think is going to be more stable at the quarterback position this season, who I think is going to be healthier on the offensive side of the ball this season, why can't they win one more game? Why can't they win 9? And that puts them into the wild card conversation. So when you look at that division as a whole, I know we're all quick to say there's no way there's 3 playoff teams coming out of that division. Washington is definitely the bottom of the division. I don't think we can make those definitive statements. I think the only definitive statement we can make about that division is the Eagles are going to win it. After that, I can see any of those 3 teams finishing third. I can see any of those 3 teams going to the playoffs or missing the playoffs. I really think it's going to be that close again in this division, and I do think this is going to be the best division in football this season. Now, I have to predict it, so I'm going to predict it, and I'm going to say, excuse me, that the Eagles are going to win it. Already said it, not a surprise there. I think that the Cowboys are going to finish in second and make the playoffs. I think Washington finishes in third, and I think the Giants round up and are in the basement. NFC West, I'm still a big believer that the Rams are not as bad as everyone says they are. I think the Rams compete for a wild card this season. I think that they are an 8 or a 9 win team. I think that if you look at so again, injuries aside, I know Kupp is banged up right now. They have an above average quarterback in Matthew Stafford. They have a great weapon in Cooper Kupp. Like I said, he needs to be on the field, so we'll see. They have a great defensive piece in Aaron Donald. They have an above average linebacker on their team. They have a young, unproven secondary, but so did the Kansas City Chiefs last season, and that went pretty well for them. They have a lot of the elements that people were knocking the Chiefs for last season, and the Chiefs won a Super Bowl. Now, I'm not saying the Rams are a Super Bowl team. I'm not saying that the Rams are going to win this division. What I'm saying is people have the Rams as a 3-win team, and they're just not that bad. I think they're a fringe playoff team. I really, really do, because of all the reasons that I just said. Now, the difference between the Rams and the Chiefs, although you can break it down and say things like above average quarterback for both, young, unproven secondary for both, so there's no reason to think that the Rams secondary can't survive the way the Chiefs secondary did. They both have a good linebacker. They both have a great defensive player on the line. They both have one great weapon, Cooper Kupp and Travis Kelce. They both have offensive gurus for head coaches. It's all the same. Now, the difference is Patrick Mahomes, obviously. Patrick Mahomes overcomes a lot of things on that Kansas City Chiefs team that Matthew Stafford isn't going to be able to overcome necessarily for the Rams. So that's why I say I think the Rams are a fringe playoff team. I think they're somewhere in the 7 to 9 win conversation. I don't think they're somewhere in the 2 to 4 win conversation, which is where a lot of people have them. So that means the Rams are going to finish third in this division, above the dumpster fire that is the Arizona Cardinals. I'm going to tell you right now, the Arizona Cardinals are going to win 1 game this season. This is going to be the take that I feel the most confident about this entire show. The Arizona Cardinals win 1 game, because here's what's going to happen. Their goal is to win 0. They're hoping to come out and not win a single game and just guarantee they get the first round pick. But this is the NFL. You're putting people, your guys are competing, right? They're going to fall into a win somewhere. Once they fall into that win, the organization is going to be like, that can't happen again. And then they're going to make sure they don't win another game. So Arizona is going to go 1-16. They are going to get the number 1 pick. They are going to draft Caleb Williams. They are going to move off of Kyler Murray, whatever that looks like. And that is the way the Arizona Cardinals season is going to go. You can say I'm wrong, and I welcome your opinion, but I strongly, strongly believe that. As far as the top of the division goes, I think the 49ers are one of the best rosters on paper in the entire NFL. As a result, they are going to win that division. I do think that the Seahawks are more of a playoff team than people are giving them credit for. I understand it's Geno Smith, but you have to look at the system. I blanked on Pete Carroll's name. That was wild. Pete Carroll is a system guy. He runs a tight ship. He has consistency on both sides of the ball. That is what Geno Smith needs. Pete Carroll is going to continuously put Geno Smith in a position to be successful. He's not going to put too much on his plate. He's not going to require him to do more than he needs to do for the most part. And because of that, Seattle is going to be pretty close, if not a step better than what they were last season. Now, can I see Seattle winning 10 games or also winning 7 or 8? Absolutely. But I don't think we're going to see a huge drop-off from Seattle. I also don't think we're going to see them win 3 or 4 more games. I think right around 9 wins, 8, 9, 10 wins is where they're going to be. And in the NFC, that could be more than enough to get into the playoffs. When we look at the NFC North, I'm a little upset. I'm a little upset for the first of all, the Chicago Bears are garbage. Don't tell me otherwise. I don't care what you have to say about Justin Fields. The Chicago Bears are going to finish last in this division, and that's all I'm going to say about it. Let's look at the other 3 teams. When you're looking at the Packers, the Vikings, and the Lions, I want to talk real quick about the absolute blasphemy that I am seeing in the national narrative when it comes to people have the Minnesota Vikings finishing 3rd in this division behind Detroit and Green Bay. Let's talk a minute about Minnesota. What in the hell have the Minnesota Vikings done to make you think they are a 3rd place team in this division? Think about it. Nothing. Aside from losing Dalvin Cook, which they chose to do, and I will be the first to tell you, Madison is not the same back that Dalvin Cook is. But also, let's be honest, running backs are a dime a dozen in this league, and I can see Madison being a 1,000-yard back. I can. Do I think he brings the explosiveness that Dalvin Cook had? No. Do I think he is the home run hitter that Dalvin Cook is and was for them? No. Do I think he is serviceable as a running back in the NFL? Yes, I do. So with that in mind, why are people saying the Minnesota Vikings are going to finish 3rd behind the Lions and the Green Bay Packers? Where is all this Green Bay Packer love coming from? Now, I have no issue with you looking at the Green Bay Packers and you saying, hey, wait a minute. Jordan Love looks good. He looks like a competent, above-average quarterback. He looks like he could be a top 16 guy. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with you saying he's developed rapport and relationships with his receivers. I'm fine with you saying that you think the Packers could compete for a wild card. I'm cool with that. I'm also cool with people who think that the Lions can win the division. I'm good with that too. What I'm not good with is people just thinking that Minnesota is going to fall off a cliff for absolutely no reason. I think that all 3 of these teams are going to be competing for that division this season. And I think it's going to shake out with the Lions just edging out the Vikings and the Packers coming in 3rd. I don't have the Packers making the playoffs. I do think the Vikings will go as a wild card team. And I do think that the Lions, who are going to be 1 game better, just 1 game, and I don't have the Lions schedule in front of me, so I don't know when they play Minnesota for the 2nd time and how close it is to the end of the season. But if it is close to the end of the season, that could be the 1 game that decides this division. But I have the Detroit Lions finishing 1 game ahead of the Vikings, and then I think the Packers will be a game or 2 behind Minnesota in 3rd place. And then, of course, that brings us to what could be the best division record-wise, not talent-wise, but record-wise in the NFL. And I'm not saying they're all going to have great records. There could be a lot of average to below average records in this division, much like last season. Let's not remember that last season, the entire NFC South was under 500. Tom Brady led the Buccaneers to an 8-9 record, while the Panthers, Saints, and Falcons all finished 7-10. I have no reason to believe that the winner of this division is going to have more than 9 wins. You could very much be looking at the winner of this division, whether it be the Saints or the Panthers, which I think it's going to be one of those two teams, but maybe the Falcons surprise us. They could easily go 9-8, and the rest of this division has 7 or 8 wins. It's going to be that close. The Buccaneers, I think, will finish at the bottom of this division just because of the quarterback situation. I like Baker Mayfield more than most, but I will also tell you that Baker is only a top 20 quarterback in this league, and he falls somewhere in the 16 to 20 range, maybe even the 18 to 20 range. Then you have Mike Evans, who he wants a new deal by week 1. He probably isn't going to get it. So then is he going to want out? Are they going to move him before the trade deadline and take that weapon off the board in Tampa? You have Kyle Trask, who had not a better preseason than Baker, but a good preseason. So if Baker does Baker things and he starts throwing picks, and he's thrown the most picks in the NFL since he came into the league, what's the hook going to be on Baker Mayfield? Do we have a new quarterback in Tampa Bay by week 6 or 7? That's a possibility. Tampa Bay, although they have pieces, although their defense is going to be good, not great, there's too much instability in Tampa Bay for me to even put this team in 3rd place. They're going to finish last. It is what it is. They're going to win 5 or 6 games. But again, let's say they win 7. That could only be a game or 2 behind the division leader. Like that's how much I think this division isn't going to be successful overall. So then you look at 3rd place, and I have to go Atlanta. And again, I struggle here because I can see Atlanta winning 9 games. I can also see Atlanta winning 6 or 7 games. But the difference is 9 games could win this division. When it comes to Atlanta, I just have too many questions with QB1. I like him better than I like Baker. I like him better than I like Kyle Trask. I don't like the defense as much as I like Tampa's defense, but I like their weapons on offense a little more than I like Tampa's weapons on offense. I really like London. I really, really do. I think he's going to have a great season. I hope they can figure out something with Kyle Pitts to make him more of an impact player. But I don't like the Falcons as much as I like the Panthers or the Saints, and that's why the Falcons are going to finish 3rd. The Saints should run away with this division. The Saints should win 11 or 12 games and easily take this division title. My issue with the Saints is I don't trust their head coach. I don't trust Carr in a situation where he's expected to win. I don't trust Michael Thomas and Jimmy Graham on the offensive side of the ball if those are supposed to be big pieces of your offense this season. You are without Kamara for the first 3 games. So who knows what that looks like. There's just a lot of little drips, a little leak over here, a little leak over there, that a good coach and a good quarterback can easily patch up. I think Carr can be a good quarterback. I don't know if their coach can be a good to great coach, but we'll see. But it's one of those situations where I need to see all the pieces come together, and you function when the expectations are there. I also need to see what happens with guys who haven't been in the league or have consistently missed seasons or huge chunks of seasons and are expected to be role players and big contributors, what that actually looks like. And then you have a situation with the Carolina Panthers where there's just as many questions with pieces that may not be as talented, but maybe have higher ceilings. And that's where I'm kind of like, what are the Panthers going to be this season? Because on paper, the Saints are the better team. Hands down, no doubt about it. But also on paper, a lot of the pieces in the Carolina organization have a higher ceiling than the pieces in the New Orleans organization have. So then I have to look at it and say, well, what if Carolina just starts hitting home runs? They just start hitting things out of the park. Things fall their way. The talent rises to the top. And maybe Carolina wins 9 games. And New Orleans wins 8 or 9, and Carolina takes the division. I can see all of that happening. But I digress, and I do think the Saints put it all together, and they end up being a 10 or 11 win team, and they do win this division fairly easily. I think that the Panthers are going to be in that 8-win range, so they're going to be 2 or 3 games behind the Saints. Then you're going to have the Falcons at 7 or 8 wins in third place, and then Tampa Bay at 4, 5, 6, whatever that looks like. Depends on how big the fire gets in Tampa. If Baker Mayfield, let me say this. If Baker is the quarterback the entire season, and he doesn't get hurt, and they don't bench him for Kyle Trask, and Mike Evans stays there the entire season, they don't trade him, and he's invested, Tampa Bay could be a 7-win team. So you could be looking at a situation where Carolina, Atlanta, and Tampa are all 7 or 8 win teams. Could very easily happen. But New Orleans should be a 10 or 11 win team and distinctively ahead of them. So there it is. There it is. There is the breakdown of each division heading into the 2023 season. When you take a look at it in the NFC, the Eagles, the Niners, they're going to be the ones vying to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. I don't really see another, maybe the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys would be my third option coming out of the NFC as far as who's going to the Super Bowl. But I really think it's in that order. The Eagles, the Niners. You could talk me into the Cowboys being a dark horse to make it to the Super Bowl. I don't have the faith in the Vikings getting there or the Lions getting there. I don't care who comes out of the NFC South. I don't think that they're going to be a Super Bowl contender. So as far as Super Bowl goes for the NFC, I think it's one of those 3 teams, and more likely one of those 2 teams in the Eagles or the 49ers. When you're looking at the AFC side of things, that's a little more wide open. I have no issue before the season begins, because again, we're talking about ceiling, right? When you're talking about the ceiling, obviously the conversation starts with the Chiefs and the Bengals. No issue with that. I have no issue with you saying the Chiefs and the Bengals are the favorites to get to the Super Bowl in the AFC. We're good there. I also have no issue with you saying that the Bills, the Dolphins, the Jets, the Chargers could be in the Super Bowl conversation. And the reason I say that is if you look at the ceiling of those teams, look at the ceiling of the Bills, the Dolphins, the Jets, the Chargers. I would even throw the Ravens into that conversation. If you look at best case scenario for each of those teams has an argument to why they could be in the Super Bowl. Each of those teams has an argument for why they could take down the Chiefs or the Bengals in an AFC championship game and get to the Super Bowl. Now, there's still a step below. There's still a step below the Chiefs and the Bengals. But I think right on that next level, each one of those teams has a strong case of why they could do it. But just like the New Orleans Saints, this is the prove it to me category. In Buffalo, can Josh Allen stop the roller coaster? Can him and Stephon Diggs be on the same page? Can they develop a run game that's not Josh Allen and a second receiving option outside of Stephon Diggs that doesn't cause a Stephon Diggs meltdown to make a deep run to the playoffs? If the answer to all those things is yes, they can be a Super Bowl team. Can the Dolphins keep Tua healthy? Can the wide receivers who were elite last season be elite again this season? And can that defense, which was ranked in the mid-20s, come up to the mid-teens? Those are all very plausible things. If all those things happen and Tua plays 17 games, I can see the argument of why the Dolphins could take down the Bengals or the Chiefs. What about the New York Jets? If the offensive line stays healthy, if they protect Aaron Rodgers, if Aaron Rodgers doesn't have chemistry issues with his young receivers like he had in Green Bay, can the Jets be a Super Bowl team? 100%. They have a top 5 defense. Let's not forget that. What about the Chargers? If they take Herbert to a new level, if that defense is just respectable and isn't giving up, 4 touchdowns in the second half of a playoff game, could they be Super Bowl contenders? Of course they can. What about the Ravens? The Ravens I would put towards the bottom of this list, but when you have an electric quarterback like Lamar Jackson, when you have the weapons that you have on offense, again, health is an issue. When we're talking about the Super Bowl level, we're going to talk about health. Can Lamar stay healthy? Can Odell stay healthy? Can their line stay healthy? What does it look like on the defensive side? Can they form a pass rush? What's the secondary going to look like? If the answer is yes, we can stay healthy, and yes, we're going to be average in all these other areas, can Lamar elevate us on a Super Bowl run? Of course he can. But these are all the things where you're like, now I need to see it. Because as a Dolphin fan, I will defend Tua until I am blue in the face. But I'm also a realist, and I know if Tua misses 5 games, the Dolphins are not making a deep playoff run. The Dolphins may not even make the playoffs. As a Jet fan, I'm okay with you having Super Bowl aspirations because in a perfect world where everything goes right, you are a Super Bowl team. But if you start off 2-4 and Aaron Rodgers is getting banged up, then hopefully you can be a realist and say, hey, this thing is kind of going off the tracks a little bit. If you're a Buffalo fan and you start off the season 3-3 and Stephon Diggs is being a diva and Josh Allen is only throwing to Diggs and running the ball himself, hopefully you can look at that and be like, hey, this isn't the recipe for success. If the Ravens start off the season 2-3 or 3-2 and they're only winning shootouts because their defense is giving up 30 points a game because they can't get to the quarterback and they can't cover on the back end, hopefully you can look at that and say, hey, they're not proving it to me. It looks like, all the pieces aren't falling in place and we're not going to be what I thought we were going to be or what our potentially was. So that's what we're looking at in the AFC. I think the AFC is much more wide open than the NFC. I don't see another team outside of Philly, San Francisco, Dallas. I don't even know if you can convince me of Minnesota or Detroit or the Saints. I don't think you can even convince me of that. I think those are the 3 possibilities. But in the AFC, once you step out of the favorites, Cincinnati and Kansas City, you can convince me of Buffalo, Miami, the New York Jets, the Baltimore Ravens, the Chargers. You can make arguments. You can make arguments and convince me that those teams have a shot to not only get to the AFC Championship game, but potentially a Super Bowl if those question marks that we have prove just to be not as big of a deal as we thought they were going to be. I'm not going to pick the Super Bowl right now. I reserve the right to wait a few weeks to see how things kind of shake out, and then I'll make my Super Bowl prediction around week 3 or 4. But that's what we're looking at. That's what we're looking at, and that brings us to the end of the Sunday morning drive. Thank you to everyone who was in the chat this morning. Mo, Ty, Jory, Freddie was in there. Kyle was in there. Appreciate all the love. Hey, big things are happening here at Sports Empire Network. If this is all you do, if the only show that you're a part of is the Sunday morning drive, you're missing out. You're missing out on a lot. And there is a lot more coming down the road. So make sure, before we leave today, make sure that you are smashing that like button. Make sure you are subscribing to us on YouTube so you can see all the shows. All the shows end up on YouTube. So make sure that you're subscribing to us on YouTube so you don't miss anything that we are doing. Make sure that you're back here, same time, same place, next week when the Sunday morning drive, it's time, baby. It is football time next Sunday. Next week on the show, we'll be breaking down all of the week 1 games. We'll be giving our predictions. We'll have some surprise guests on the panel. It is going to be a week 1 partay next week on the Sunday morning drive. So make sure you are here for that. But that is it. My time is up. I will see you 1 week from today as we really, really jump into week 1 of the NFL season. Until then, thank you for being awesome, and I'll see you next time around.